My name is Clifford, 65 years old, and a proud single father who raised my only son Andrew from the age of 5. When he told me he was marrying into the wealthy Franklin family, I was hopeful despite their obvious disdain for my middle-class lifestyle. Little did I know that what should have been the happiest day of his life would turn into my greatest humiliation. But sometimes life has a way of turning the tables when you least expect it. Before I tell you what happened at that fateful wedding, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear how one phone call changed everything overnight. The journey that led to that wedding day began 20 years ago when my beautiful wife Laura lost her battle with cancer. Andrew was just 5 years old, and suddenly I was alone, responsible for raising our son while dealing with my own grief. Those early years were the hardest. I worked construction during the day and took night security shifts just to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded myself. Every decision I made centered around giving Andrew the best life possible. When the heating would break, I would bundle up in extra layers so I could use what little savings we had for his winter clothes instead. When he needed a computer for school, I sold my beloved classic car that I had been restoring. His birthday presents always came before paying my own bills. That was just what being a father meant to me. Despite our financial struggles, Andrew thrived. He was naturally brilliant, staying up late, studying by the dim light of our kitchen table. I would come home exhausted from my second job to find him surrounded by books, determination etched on his young face. By high school, he was at the top of his class, and I swelled with pride watching him receive award after award at ceremonies where I sat alone among two-parent families. The proudest moment of my life came when Andrew received a full academic scholarship to Westmore University, one of the most prestigious schools in the country. We celebrated with a dinner at our favorite diner. Nothing fancy, but perfect for us. I remember how his eyes shone with excitement about the future, a future that would be so different from my own. It was during his junior year at Westmore that Andrew met Diana Franklin. He called me one evening, his voice different somehow, lighter. He had met someone special in his economics class, he told me, the daughter of Harold Franklin, the billionaire real estate mogul whose name adorned buildings across the country. I felt a twist of concern in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. My son deserved happiness, regardless of where it came from. The first time I met the Franklins was at a dinner Andrew insisted on. I arrived at the 5-star restaurant in my best clothes, which I now realized fell embarrassingly short of appropriate. Harold Franklin wore a watch that probably cost more than my annual salary, while his wife Margaret dripped in diamonds. Diana was beautiful in an untouchable way, her posture perfect, her smile practiced. They ordered wine that cost hundreds per bottle and spoke about their recent trip to Monaco as casually as I would discuss going to the grocery store. Throughout dinner, Margaret would make comments that felt like tiny paper cuts. When I mentioned my job in construction management, she said, "How fascinating that you found stable employment without a college degree. Such an inspiration." When I declined the lobster because of the price, she insisted on ordering it for me, saying, "We simply must expand your palate, Mr. Stevens. Andrew tells us your usual fare is quite simple." Each word came with a smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. Andrew seemed oblivious to the subtle digs, his gaze fixed adoringly on Diana. I could see he was completely smitten, and I worried. These were not our kind of people. But who was I to stand in the way of his happiness? Despite my misgivings, the relationship progressed quickly. Andrew began spending holidays with the Franklins at their various properties around the world, instead of in our small 2-bedroom home. When he did visit, he would unconsciously drop references to experiences I could never provide him, sailing on private yachts, flying in private jets, dining with celebrities and politicians. 6 months after they met, Andrew called to tell me they were engaged. Diana had a 7-carat diamond on her finger, and the Franklins were already planning what would surely be the wedding of the season. My son sounded happy, if somewhat dazed by it all, and I swallowed my concerns. I told him I was thrilled and that his mother would have been proud. That part, at least, was true. What Andrew never knew, what I had deliberately kept from him his entire life, was that we could have lived very differently had I chosen another path. Before he was born, I had made some shrewd investments and business decisions that had paid off tremendously. But Laura and I had agreed that we wanted to raise our child with values rather than privilege. After her death, I maintained our modest lifestyle, keeping my considerable financial assets carefully hidden through a complex network of holding companies and investments managed by my trusted friend Thomas Reed. I wanted Andrew to develop character, to understand the value of hard work, to know what it meant to earn something rather than simply expect it. Perhaps it was old-fashioned thinking, but I had seen too many children of wealthy families grow into entitled, hollow adults. I was determined that my son would not be one of them. As the wedding date approached, I found myself reflecting more on these choices. Had I done the right thing? Would Andrew resent me if he knew the truth? These questions kept me awake at night, but I continued to hold my silence. I had made my decision years ago, and I would stand by it, at least for now. The months leading up to the wedding were increasingly difficult. I had saved for nearly a year to afford the designer suit that was deemed acceptable by the wedding planner hired by the Franklins. It cost more than 3 months of my mortgage payments. But I wanted to look the part for Andrew. I wanted him to be proud to call me his father. From the beginning, Margaret Franklin made it clear that my input was neither needed nor wanted in the wedding preparations. When I offered to contribute financially, she looked at me as if I had suggested paying in bottle caps. That will not be necessary, Mr. Stevens. The Franklins always handle these matters. We would not dream of burdening you. The subtext was clear. What I could offer was insignificant. Andrew became increasingly distant as the wedding approached. He was absorbed into Diana's world, swept along by her family's influence and expectations. Our weekly phone calls dwindled to monthly, then to sporadic texts. When we did speak, he seemed distracted, his voice taking on inflections and phrases that were foreign to him, borrowed from his future in-laws. One evening, about 2 months before the wedding, Andrew accidentally sent me a text that was clearly meant for someone else. It was a screenshot of a message from Diana. "Daddy is insisting we invite your father to the rehearsal dinner too. I told him how uncomfortable everyone will be with him there. No offense, but your dad is so out of his league. Maybe we can seat him with the service staff? They might have more in common, lol." My heart sank as I read those words. Worse was the text Andrew had written below it. "D is being dramatic about Dad again. What should I say? I know he will not fit in, but he is still my father." I never mentioned receiving the message. A week later, Andrew called to tell me that, unfortunately, the rehearsal dinner would be limited to immediate family only. I did not point out that I was, in fact, his immediate family. I simply told him I understood. As the wedding day approached, I visited the Franklin estate to drop off my suit to ensure it would be properly steamed and ready for the ceremony. While there, I happened to glance at a seating chart left open on a tablet in the wedding planner's office. I was seated at table 19, the furthest from the main table, positioned near the kitchen doors with the photographer's assistants and some distant relatives no one had seen in years. On my way out, I overheard Diana and Margaret speaking in the garden. I did not mean to eavesdrop, but when I heard my name, I froze. "Mother, Andrew is insisting his father give a toast," Diana was saying, her voice petulant. "Absolutely not," Margaret replied firmly. "Can you imagine what that man would say? He would embarrass us all." "No, I have already arranged for Harold's brother to give the father of the groom speech. We will tell Andrew it is tradition in our circle. But what if he makes a scene?" Margaret laughed, a cold sound like ice cracking. "Darling, men like Clifford Stevens do not make scenes. They are too grateful to be included at all. Trust me, he will accept whatever scraps of acknowledgement we throw his way. People like him always do." I slipped away before they could see me, my face burning with humiliation. That night, I seriously considered not attending the wedding at all. But Andrew was my son, my only family. Despite everything, I could not bring myself to abandon him on his wedding day. It was during this difficult time that I received an unexpected call from Thomas Reed, the financial advisor and old friend who had been managing my investments for decades. There were some developments, with one of my major holdings, that required my attention, he explained. A significant opportunity had arisen, and he needed my decision. Not now, Thomas, I said wearily. The wedding is this weekend. Whatever it is can wait until next week. Clifford. His voice had an unusual urgency. You might want to hear this before the wedding. It concerns Franklin Industries. That caught my attention, but I was too emotionally drained to process business matters. Monday, Thomas. We will discuss it Monday. The night before the wedding, Andrew came to see me at my hotel. It was the first time we had been alone together in months, and there was an awkwardness between us that had never existed before. We made small talk about the weather, about my flight in, about anything but the growing distance between us. Finally, as he was leaving, he turned to me with something like his old self in his eyes. Dad, he said hesitantly, I know the Franklins can be a lot, but once Diana and I are married, things will be different. You will see. I nodded and hugged him tightly. I just want you to be happy, son. That is all I have ever wanted. As I watched him drive away in his new luxury car, a gift from Harold, I could not shake the feeling that I was losing him. Not just to Diana, but to a world that would always look down on the life and values I had given him. Still, I was determined to maintain my dignity throughout the wedding festivities. Whatever happened, I would hold my head high and remember that I had raised a son I could be proud of. That was what mattered most. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, as if the weather itself had been arranged by the Franklins. I arrived at their estate early, hoping to have a moment with Andrew before the ceremony. The grounds were already buzzing with activity. Staff members in crisp uniforms, setting up elaborate flower arrangements and crystal decorations that probably cost more than my annual salary. I offered to help carry some boxes from a delivery van, a habit from my construction days, but was quickly shooed away by the wedding planner. Mr. Stevens, please. We have staff for that. She said it kindly enough, but her expression suggested I was embarrassing myself. The Franklin estate was truly magnificent, spanning over 20 acres with manicured gardens and a view of the lake that took your breath away. The main house was a modern mansion of glass and stone, at least 15,000 square feet of opulence. Guests began to arrive in luxury cars and private shuttles, the women in designer dresses, the men in tailored suits that made my carefully selected outfit look distinctly off the rack. I smiled politely as I was directed through the crowd, acutely aware of the curious glances and whispered comments that followed me. That is the groom's father, I heard one woman murmur to another. Yes, the construction worker, came the reply, followed by a sound that was not quite a laugh. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon, followed by cocktails and then the reception dinner at 6. I made my way to the reception hall early, hoping to find my seat and settle in before having to navigate the social minefield of the cocktail hour. A cheerful young staff member directed me to table 19, just as I had seen on the seating chart. I approached the table, looking for my name card among the place settings. Each card was elegantly handwritten in gold ink on heavy cream cardstock. I checked each one, thinking perhaps there had been a last-minute change. And then I found it. The card at the setting directly facing the kitchen doors did not say Mr. Clifford Stevens. Instead, in the same elegant handwriting, it read, "The Charity Case." I stared at it, certain I was mistaken. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands, as if the correct card might be hidden underneath. But there was no mistake. Someone had deliberately labeled me a charity case. From behind me came the unmistakable sound of stifled laughter. I turned to find a group of Franklin family friends watching me from the high table, their amusement barely concealed behind jewelry-adorned hands. And there, at the center of the group, was Margaret Franklin, her cold eyes meeting mine with a look of smug satisfaction. My face burned with humiliation, but I forced myself to stand straight. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I placed the card back on the table and turned to leave, dignity intact, determined to find Andrew and then quietly exit this farce of a celebration. But as I tried to make my way toward the area where I knew the wedding party would be preparing, a large security guard stepped in front of me. "I am sorry, sir. This area is restricted to family only." "I am family," I said quietly. "I am Andrew's father." The guard's expression did not change. "I have strict instructions, sir. Perhaps you could return to your assigned seating area." Before I could argue further, Margaret Franklin appeared at my elbow, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she placed a restraining hand on my arm. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Stevens?" Her voice was honey-coated poison. "There seems to be a mistake with my place card," I said evenly, meeting her gaze. "Oh? What sort of mistake?" The faux innocence in her tone made my blood boil. "It does not have my name. It says something else." She smiled, a predatory curve of perfectly lipsticked mouth. "Does it? How careless of the staff. What does it say?" She was playing with me, like a cat with a cornered mouse. We both knew she was responsible. I took a deep breath. "It says, the charity case." "Oh my," she said, not bothering to hide her amusement now. "How inappropriate. Though not entirely inaccurate, is it? After all, we have included you despite your limitations. Most would consider that charitable." I stared at her, shocked by the naked contempt in her voice. "I would like to see my son. Andrew is quite busy with his real family at the moment," she replied. "The people who will actually be part of his future, not his regrettable past." Just then Diana appeared, resplendent in her designer wedding gown. She assessed the situation quickly, her eyes narrowing. "Margaret, the photographer needs you," she said to her mother, before turning to me with a brittle smile. "Mr. Stevens, is there a problem?" "I just wanted to see Andrew before the ceremony," I said. Her smile did not waver, but her eyes were cold. "Andrew has moved beyond his humble beginnings. Mr. Stevens, surely you can appreciate that we need to maintain certain standards today. Perhaps it would be best if you simply took your seat. Or," she added, her voice dropping to ensure only I could hear, "if you are uncomfortable, you could always leave. No one would really notice, least of all Andrew." The casual cruelty of her words stunned me. This was the woman my son had chosen to marry? As if summoned by my thoughts, Andrew appeared. His face registered surprise, then concern as he took in the tableau before him. His bride, his future mother-in-law, and his father locked in what was clearly a tense standoff. "Dad? Is everything okay?" he asked, coming to stand beside Diana, who immediately took his arm possessively. "No, son, it is not," I said quietly. "I think we need to talk privately." Diana's grip on his arm tightened. "Andrew, darling, the photographer is waiting for us. Your father was just concerned about some minor seating confusion." Andrew looked uncertain, torn between us. "What seating confusion?" I held his gaze. "My place card does not have my name, son. It identifies me as the charity case." His eyes widened in genuine shock. "What? That must be a mistake." "It was no mistake," I said flatly. "Your future mother-in-law and bride find it amusing." Andrew turned to Diana, who immediately adopted an expression of wounded innocence. "Andrew, I have no idea what he is talking about. The cards were all professionally done. Perhaps he misread it? Then let us go look at it," I suggested. "There is no time for that," Diana snapped, her mask slipping momentarily. She quickly composed herself, turning to Andrew with tears in her eyes. "Are you really going to let your father ruin our special day with these ridiculous accusations?" Andrew looked trapped, his eyes moving between us. I could see the conflict in him, the desire to please his new family warring with his loyalty to me. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. "It is all right, son," I said gently. "You have your wedding to attend to. We can talk another time." Relief flooded his face, and my heart broke a little. "Are you sure, Dad? I can come find you after the ceremony." "Of course he is sure," Diana interjected smoothly. "Your father understands what is important today. Do not you, Mr. Stevens?" I looked at my son one last time, at the boy I had raised alone, the young man I had sacrificed everything for. I could tell him the truth now, expose the Franklins for what they were, but what would that accomplish except to ruin his wedding day? "Be happy, Andrew," I said simply, and walked away. As I made my lonely way back through the crowd of strangers in their finery, past the elaborate flower arrangements and crystal champagne flutes, I felt a profound sense of loss. Not just of my son, but of the life we had shared, the values I thought I had instilled in him. The walk to my car in the distant guest parking area seemed endless. With each step, the weight of humiliation and betrayal threatened to overwhelm me. But I would not break. I had faced worse in my life, and survived. This too would pass. The drive back to my hotel was a blur of conflicting emotions. Anger burned through me like acid, not just at the Franklins, but at myself for allowing them to treat me like something scraped from the bottom of their designer shoes. Disappointment in Andrew cut deepest of all. My son, who I had raised to recognize the value of character over wealth, had stood by while I was humiliated. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and sat in my car, staring unseeing at the dashboard. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. For 20 years, I had lived a lie for what I believed was Andrew's benefit. I had denied myself the comfort and security my wealth could have provided us both. And for what? So he could abandon the values I had sacrificed to instill in him the moment a pretty girl from a rich family looked his way? It was in this moment of bitter clarity that I remembered Thomas Reed's urgent call from the day before. Something about Franklin Industries that he thought I should know before the wedding. With trembling fingers, I took out my phone and dialed his number. Despite the late hour, he answered on the second ring. "Clifford?" His voice was alert, concerned. "Are you all right?" "No, Thomas, I am not," I said honestly. "But I would like to hear what you were trying to tell me yesterday. What about Franklin Industries?" There was a slight pause. "Are you somewhere private? Can you talk freely?" "Yes, I am alone, and the wedding is no longer a concern." Another pause. "I see. Well, Clifford, there have been some interesting developments. As you know, Westlake Holdings has been a dormant investment for you for many years. Westlake Holdings was a shell corporation I had established decades ago, one of several that helped conceal the true extent of my wealth. It held a diverse portfolio of investments across multiple industries. Last month, there was a series of share transfers and acquisitions that went through several intermediaries," Thomas continued. "When we traced it all back, we discovered something quite remarkable. Through Westlake and its subsidiaries, you now effectively control 51% of the shares in Redstone Capital." The name was familiar, but I could not immediately place it. Redstone Capital? Yes. And Redstone Capital is the majority shareholder in Franklin Industries. The implications hit me like a physical blow. "Are you saying—" "I am saying, Clifford, that you are now effectively the controlling shareholder of Franklin Industries. Harold Franklin answers to you, though he does not know it yet." My mind raced with this information. All these years living modestly, driving my 10-year-old car, working my construction job, while secretly I had been amassing a fortune through carefully managed investments. And now, by some twist of financial fate, I found myself in control of the very company owned by the family that had just humiliated me. "There is more," Thomas said, his voice dropping slightly as if sharing a secret despite our private connection. "Our preliminary review suggests that Franklin Industries is not as financially solid as they project. They have overextended themselves on several development projects, and there are some questionable accounting practices we have flagged for further investigation. Harold has been keeping up appearances, but the reality is they are walking a financial tightrope." A plan began to form in my mind, a way to teach the Franklins a lesson they would never forget. But I hesitated. Was revenge what I really wanted? What would Laura have advised if she were still here? I closed my eyes, trying to imagine what my late wife would say. Laura had always been my moral compass, gently steering me toward kindness even when it was difficult. But she had also believed firmly in accountability. "What are my options here, Thomas?" I asked finally. "Legally, you have significant leverage," he replied. "As the majority shareholder, you could call for a full audit of the company's books. You could temporarily remove Harold from his position pending the results. Given what we have already found, that would likely lead to some uncomfortable revelations. And this would all be legal? Above board? Absolutely. It would simply be a majority shareholder exercising due diligence, nothing more." I thought about Margaret's cold smile as she watched me discover my humiliating place card. I thought about Diana's casual cruelty and Andrew's failure to stand up for me. But I also thought about the staff at Franklin Industries, ordinary people who might be hurt if the company collapsed. "I need to think this through carefully," I said at last. "Can you prepare the paperwork for a possible board meeting first thing tomorrow, but hold off on filing anything until you hear from me?" "Of course," Thomas agreed. "And Clifford? For what it is worth, I am sorry about whatever happened at the wedding. You deserved better." After ending the call, I spent the next hour making a series of carefully considered phone calls to other members of my financial team and legal advisors. By midnight, I had a clear plan of action that would satisfy my need for justice without crossing into pure vengeance. Sleep eluded me as I weighed the potential consequences. Would this permanently damage my relationship with Andrew? Possibly. But that relationship was already damaged, perhaps beyond repair. At least this way, he might learn an important lesson about the people he had aligned himself with. As dawn broke, I made my final decision. I called Thomas. "Go ahead with the plan," I said simply. "And Thomas? Make sure everything is done by the book. This is not about revenge. It is about accountability." "Understood," he replied. "The board meeting is set for 9 a.m. A car will pick you up at 8. I hung up and stared out the window at the rising Sunday. For 20 years, I had lived as less than I was for Andrew's sake. Today, I would reclaim my true identity, not out of pride, but out of necessity. Some lessons could only be learned the hard way. At precisely 9 a.m., I entered the impressive glass and steel headquarters of Franklin Industries in downtown Boston. I wore the same suit I had purchased for the wedding, though now it seemed fitting for an entirely different reason. The security guards nodded respectfully as Thomas Reed escorted me through the lobby to the private elevator that would take us to the executive floor. "The board has been called for an emergency meeting," Thomas informed me quietly. "They have been told only that a major shareholder has concerns that need immediate attention. Harold Franklin is already there, along with the other directors, and they have no idea who I am?" Thomas allowed himself a small smile. "None whatsoever. This will be quite the revelation." The elevator doors opened directly into a plush anteroom outside the boardroom. Through the glass walls, I could see 10 men and 2 women seated around a massive table, with Harold Franklin at the head, his expression thunderous. He was clearly unhappy about being summoned on such short notice, especially the morning after his daughter's wedding. "Ready?" Thomas asked. I nodded, straightening my tie. "As I will ever be." We entered the boardroom, and all conversation ceased. Harold Franklin's eyes widened in shock as he recognized me. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, rising halfway from his chair. "How dare you interrupt a private board meeting?" Thomas stepped forward smoothly. "Mr. Franklin, directors of the board, allow me to introduce Mr. Clifford Stevens, the majority shareholder of Westlake Holdings, which, as of last month, effectively controls 51% of Franklin Industries through its ownership stake in Redstone Capital." A stunned silence fell over the room. Harold sank slowly back into his chair, his face draining of color. "That is impossible," he whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. I took the seat at the opposite end of the table, directly facing Harold. "I assure you, it is not only possible, it is factual. The paperwork has been verified by your own legal team, as of 7 this morning." One of the other directors, a silver-haired man with shrewd eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Stevens, forgive me, but this is quite unexpected. What are your intentions here?" "My intentions are simple," I replied calmly. As the new majority shareholder, I am exercising my right to call for a complete audit of Franklin Industries' financial records and operations. Pending the results of this audit, I am also requesting a temporary leadership change. Chaos erupted around the table. Several directors began talking at once, some demanding explanations, others already reaching for their phones to call their brokers. Harold Franklin sat immobile, staring at me as if seeing a ghost. "This is because of last night," he said finally, his voice barely audible over the commotion. "Margaret and Diana. What did they do?" I kept my expression neutral. "This is not personal, Mr. Franklin. It is simply business. My financial team has identified some concerning patterns in the company's recent reports that warrant closer examination." "Bullshit," he spat, some color returning to his face. "You were nobody. A construction worker. Andrew's charity case of a father. Now suddenly you are a major investor? This is about revenge." I leaned forward slightly. "I have been many things in my life, Mr. Franklin. A loving husband, a devoted father, a hard-working employee. What I have never been is a charity case. Now, shall we proceed with the meeting, or would you prefer to continue making assumptions about me that you cannot support?" By noon, news of the unexpected board meeting and temporary leadership change had leaked to the financial press. Franklin Industries stock began a steady decline as investors reacted to the uncertainty. Business news channels ran special segments speculating on the identity of the mysterious Clifford Stevens, the apparently wealthy investor who had lived as an ordinary construction manager, despite controlling a significant investment portfolio. By 2 p.m., the audit team had begun their work, sequestering themselves in a conference room with boxes of financial records. Their preliminary findings confirmed Thomas's suspicions. Harold Franklin had been engaging in increasingly risky financial maneuvers to maintain the appearance of success while actual revenues declined. I received regular updates throughout the afternoon as I worked from a temporary office they had provided me. At 4 p.m., Thomas knocked on my door with news I had been half expecting. "The Franklin family assets have been temporarily frozen pending completion of the audit," he informed me. "Standard procedure given the potential for financial impropriety." I nodded, imagining the scene that must be unfolding across town at the lavish post-wedding brunch the Franklins had planned. Indeed, at that very moment, Diana Franklin was discovering that her credit card had been declined as she attempted to pay for an additional champagne service. Margaret Franklin was finding that her accounts were suddenly inaccessible, and Harold Franklin was not answering his phone as his wife and daughter tried desperately to reach him. By 6 p.m., Harold Franklin himself arrived at my temporary office, his usual commanding presence diminished by the day's events. He looked older, tired, the bluster gone from his demeanor. "May I speak with you privately?" he asked, his voice subdued. I nodded, dismissing my assistant with a gesture. When the door closed, Harold sank into the chair opposite my desk. For a long moment he said nothing, simply studying me with new eyes. "You could have destroyed us at any point," he said finally. "Why wait until now?" I considered my answer carefully. "I had no reason to interfere in your business, Mr. Franklin. Until yesterday, our paths crossed only socially, through our children." He winced slightly at that. "Margaret told me about the place card incident. I want you to know I had no knowledge of it." "But you are not surprised by it," I observed. He sighed heavily. "No. Margaret and Diana. They can be cruel, especially to those they perceive as beneath them." He hesitated, "Which I also believed you to be, until today. I owe you an apology for that assumption. I lived modestly by choice, Mr. Franklin, not by necessity. I wanted my son to develop character, not entitlement." He nodded slowly. "A philosophy I should perhaps have applied in my own family." He straightened in his chair. "What happens now? Are you going to dismantle everything I have built?" "That depends entirely on what the audit reveals," I replied honestly. "If there has been criminal financial misconduct, that will be a matter for the authorities. If it is merely poor management and excessive risk-taking, there may be a path forward. We are overextended, he admitted, surprising me with his candor. The appearance of success became more important than the reality of it. Margaret's spending, the multiple homes, the jets. I kept taking bigger risks to maintain it all. I studied him, seeing for the first time a man not so different from myself, caught in a web partly of his own making. Why are you telling me this? His eyes met mine directly. Because whatever happens next, I want you to know that I accept responsibility for my actions. And because I hope you will consider the hundreds of employees who depend on Franklin Industries for their livelihoods. As Harold left my office, I received a text message from Andrew. It was the first of 20 he had sent throughout the day, each growing increasingly urgent. Dad, what is going on? Diana's cards are not working. The news is saying something about Franklin Industries and a shareholder named Clifford Stevens. Is that you? Please call me. I set my phone aside without replying. Andrew would have to wait. There would be time for explanations later, after I had finished what I had begun. By 8 p.m., the initial phase of the audit had uncovered enough evidence of financial mismanagement to justify the temporary measures I had implemented. There was no turning back now. The Franklins would face the consequences of their actions, both financial and personal. As I finally left the office that evening, I realized that in a single day, the dynamic between our families had completely reversed. Now they were the ones in need of charity, and I held the power to give it or withhold it. The irony was not lost on me. The next morning, I was having coffee in my modest home when the doorbell rang insistently. I knew who it would be before I opened the door. Andrew stood on my porch, his face a storm of confusion and anger. His wedding suit was rumpled, as if he had slept in it, and his eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "What have you done?" I stepped aside to let him in. "Come inside, son. We have a lot to talk about." He paced my small living room like a caged animal, while I calmly resumed my seat. This room, with its comfortable but worn furniture, had been the backdrop for countless father-son conversations over the years, but never one like this. "You are the majority shareholder of Franklin Industries?" he demanded. "You have been wealthy this whole time? All those years of struggling, of sacrifices, of working multiple jobs. It was all a lie?" I set my coffee down carefully. "Not a lie, Andrew. A choice. Your mother and I made it together before you were born. We wanted you to grow up understanding the value of hard work and character. We did not want wealth to define you. So you deceived me my entire life," he exploded. "Do you have any idea what we went through? The nights I went to bed hungry so you could pay the electric bill? The scholarships I killed myself to get because we supposedly could not afford college? All unnecessary. A game you were playing." His words stung, but I remained calm. "It was never a game, son. It was parenting, the kind that builds resilience and compassion." "Compassion?" He laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call destroying Diana's family the day after our wedding? Her father might go to jail. Did you know that? They have frozen all their accounts. The house, the cars, everything might be seized. Is that your idea of compassion?" I looked at my son steadily. "Andrew, your father-in-law made poor business decisions that put his company at risk long before yesterday. All I did was call for an audit, which is my right as a majority shareholder. If Harold goes to jail, it will be because of his own actions, not mine." Before Andrew could respond, there was another knock at the door. This time, the visitors were unexpected. Diana stood there, her perfect makeup from yesterday now streaked with tears, flanked by her parents. Margaret's normally imperious expression was replaced by one of desperate humility, while Harold looked resigned. "May we come in?" Harold asked quietly. I nodded, stepping back to allow the Franklin family into my home. Diana rushed immediately to Andrew's side, clutching his arm as if for support. Margaret looked around my living room with new eyes, no longer seeing it as pitifully modest, but now as a deliberate choice by a man who could afford far more. "Mr. Stevens," Harold began, "we have come to apologize and to ask for your mercy." Margaret stepped forward, her diamonds conspicuously absent today. "What happened at the wedding was unforgivable. The place card was my idea. Diana merely went along with it." She swallowed visibly. "I have spent my life judging people by their wealth and status. I was cruel to you because I thought you were beneath us. I was wrong, and I am deeply sorry." Her apology sounded rehearsed and insincere, a stark contrast to Harold's genuine remorse from the previous day. I could see that she was motivated not by true regret but by the desperate desire to restore her comfortable lifestyle. Diana spoke next, tears flowing freely. "Mr. Stevens, please do not punish my family for my mistake. We can work this out. Andrew and I love each other. We can be one big family." She turned pleading eyes to my son. "Tell him, Andrew. Tell your father to stop this." I watched my son carefully, seeing the conflict in his eyes as he looked between his new wife and me. This was the moment of truth that would define our relationship moving forward. "Diana," Andrew said slowly, "did you really call my father a charity case? Did you deliberately humiliate him at our wedding?" Diana's expression shifted, calculation replacing tears. "It was just a stupid joke that went too far. My mother pressured me. You know how she is." "That is not an answer," Andrew pressed, stepping away from her slightly. "What does it matter now?" Diana snapped, her mask slipping. "Your father is rich. Richer than my family, apparently. He can take a joke. The real issue here is that he is destroying my family out of petty revenge." And there it was, the true Diana, emerging under pressure. Andrew stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "This is not about money," he said quietly. "It is about respect. It is about how you treat people, regardless of what you think they have or do not have." Harold cleared his throat uncomfortably. "If I may, Mr. Stevens, I take full responsibility for the financial issues at Franklin Industries. I made poor decisions, took excessive risks, and likely violated some regulations in the process. But my wife and daughter should not suffer for my mistakes." I studied him thoughtfully. Unlike his wife and daughter, Harold seemed to have undergone a genuine change of heart. "What would you propose, Mr. Franklin?" I asked. "A compromise," he replied. "I will step down as CEO temporarily and cooperate fully with the audit. I will accept whatever legal consequences come my way. In return, I ask that you consider allowing the company to continue operations under new leadership, preserving the jobs of our employees. And perhaps," he added hesitantly, "you might release some personal funds to my family for basic living expenses while this situation resolves." It was a reasonable request, one that showed concern for others beyond himself. I nodded slowly. "I think those terms are acceptable, with some conditions," I said. "First, Franklin Industries will implement a comprehensive ethics training program for all executives. Second, you and your family will commit to 200 hours of community service, working with those less fortunate. And third," I looked directly at Margaret, "a sincere, public apology for the incident at the wedding." Margaret looked as if she might object, but Harold silenced her with a look. "We agree to your terms," he said firmly. Andrew had been watching this exchange with growing understanding. Now he turned to Diana, who was seething silently beside him. "I think I need some time," he said quietly. "This is not the marriage or the family I thought I was joining. I need to reconsider everything." Diana's face contorted with anger. "You cannot be serious. After everything my family has done for you, you would choose your deceiving father over me?" "I am not choosing anyone right now," Andrew replied. "I am simply taking time to think clearly." As the Franklins prepared to leave, Harold paused by my chair. "You are a better man than I am, Clifford Stevens," he said quietly. "I hope one day to have the integrity you have shown today." After they left, Andrew and I sat in silence for a long moment. Finally he spoke. "Why did you never tell me the truth? Did you not trust me?" I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder. "It was never about trust, son. Your mother and I wanted to give you something more valuable than money. We wanted to give you the chance to become the kind of man who would do the right thing regardless of circumstances." I paused. "Like you did today." Slowly, uncertainly, Andrew smiled. It was a small gesture, but in it, I saw the possibility of reconciliation. Whatever came next, we would face it together, father and son, with a new understanding between us. 6 months passed, bringing changes none of us could have predicted on that tumultuous wedding day. Franklin Industries underwent a complete restructuring, emerging as a more stable, ethically managed company. The audit revealed significant financial mismanagement, but stopped short of criminal fraud, allowing Harold to avoid jail time. After completing an intensive corporate governance program, he returned to the company in a reduced role, with professional management overseeing day-to-day operations. True to my word, I moved from my longtime home to a slightly larger house in the same neighborhood. It was comfortable without being ostentatious, a middle ground that acknowledged my financial reality while maintaining the values I held dear. My construction colleagues were shocked to learn about my hidden wealth, but most relationships survived the revelation. Those that did not, perhaps, were not true friendships to begin with. In the aftermath of the wedding disaster, Andrew and Diana separated to consider their futures individually. The annulment was finalized 3 months later. A mutual decision reached after counseling revealed fundamental differences in values and priorities. The experience had changed Andrew, making him more thoughtful about the kind of life he truly wanted. Perhaps the most surprising development came from Diana herself. After the initial shock and anger wore off, she approached me with an unexpected request: guidance on establishing a foundation to support single parents and their children. Whether motivated by genuine remorse or a desire to rehabilitate her public image, her work showed promise. She began volunteering weekly at a community center in a low-income neighborhood, and I occasionally received reports that she was developing genuine empathy for people she once would have dismissed. Margaret Franklin's transformation was less dramatic but still noteworthy. The public apology she issued was clearly carefully crafted by a PR team, but in subsequent months, I observed small changes in her behavior. The experience of temporary financial insecurity had left its mark, making her marginally more conscious of her privilege. The most meaningful outcome for me personally was the establishment of the Laura Stevens Foundation, named after my late wife. Using a portion of my now public wealth, the foundation provided scholarships to children of single parents, ensuring they would not have to struggle as Andrew and I had. The first class of 20 scholarship recipients had just been selected, each showing the same determination and character I had tried to instill in my own son. On a cool autumn evening, 6 months to the day after the wedding, Andrew and I sat on the porch of my new home, watching the sunset. We had established a new Sunday dinner tradition, rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. "I have been thinking a lot about what you and Mom did," Andrew said, breaking a comfortable silence, "choosing to live modestly when you did not have to." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I was angry at first," he admitted. "I felt deceived. But the more I think about it, the more I understand. You wanted me to know what it meant to earn something, to work for it. You wanted me to value people for who they are, not what they have." "That was the idea," I agreed softly, though I sometimes wondered if we made the right choice. Andrew smiled. "The Franklins taught me something important, Dad. I saw what happens when wealth becomes your identity, when you judge your worth and everyone else's by money and status. I do not want to be that kind of person." He paused. "So yes, I think you and Mom made the right choice." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. "What will you do now?" I asked. "With the knowledge of your inheritance?" He considered this thoughtfully. "I want to continue my work in sustainable architecture. Maybe expand the practice to include affordable housing projects. Use what I have to make a difference, but never forget where I came from." He glanced at me. I had a good teacher in that regard. The following weekend, we hosted a dinner that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. Harold and Margaret Franklin joined us. along with Thomas Reed and a few close friends. The conversation was occasionally stilted, the weight of our shared history evident in careful phrases and considered responses. But there was also laughter, genuine moments of connection that suggested healing was possible. After dinner, Harold took me aside. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "You could have destroyed me, my company, everything. You had every right to after how my family treated you. Instead, you showed mercy when it was least deserved. That taught me something about the kind of man I want to be." I thought about his words long after our guests had departed. The journey from charity case to unlikely mentor for the very people who had humiliated me was not one I could have imagined. Life had a strange way of coming full circle. The true wealth in my life had never been in offshore accounts or investment portfolios. It was in the integrity I had maintained through difficulty, the son I had raised to stand up for what was right, and the capacity to offer compassion even to those who had shown me none. These were the treasures that could never be quantified on a balance sheet. In the end, I learned that standing up for your dignity does not mean denying others theirs, that accountability and compassion can coexist, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to recognize their mistakes and grow from them. Have you ever been underestimated or humiliated by someone who later needed your help? How did you respond? Share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences that remind us of what truly matters. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message about dignity and compassion, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, true wealth is measured not by what you have, but by who you are.